Hello and welcome back to AXA XL Arctic Live. Amazing to have you all with us for this expert interview with the wonderful Nick Cox. Nick, welcome to Arctic Live.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
And we've got an amazing range of schools joining us from Brazil, the UK, USA, Panama, Colombia, and Canada.
Oh, wow.
And some shout outs before we start, some shout outs to some of the classes who are watching us. We've got hello to students watching from King's College in Panama.
Hello.
All the way
Hey.
from the Arctic to Panama. Wonderful
Hey.
to have you with us. We have Riverside Public School, and we have Aspira Bilingual Cyber Charter School. Hello to both of you.
Hey. Welcome.
Little Rouge Public School, and Union Point Academy. So big
Yeah.
hello to
Hey.
all the students
Hey.
there. Nick, we are in the Arctic. We are in a settlement called Neolesund.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, can you locate that for some of our classes who are
Yeah.
watching?
We're on an archipelago, which is a group of islands in the high Arctic. So we're just to the east of North Greenland. We're actually nearer Greenland than we are Norway, but we're due north of Norway, almost midway between Norway and the North Pole. Yeah.
Fantastic. And 79 north, we've got another 11 degrees to
Yeah,
90
yeah.
north to get to the North Pole.
North Pole. Yeah, so we're at 79 degrees north, and the North Pole is at 90. So yes, and from where the last stop of land, if you like, before you reach the North Pole, and north of us here is frozen sea, pack ice, and so on, that carries on over to the other side, North Pole, and then onwards over to the Bering Strait and Russia and Alaska on the other side.
Amazing. And Neolesund is this amazing sort of village and community in lots of ways. This most northerly community in the world.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary collection of research stations here. It really is quite unique because we have our station here, which is run by the UK. We have stations here run by China, by India, Italy, France, Germany, and Netherlands, and others. Japan,
Norway,
of course. And so here we are, a sort of collection of research stations living cheek by jowl and working together and experiencing this extraordinary place together.
Nick, we're just going to go outside to show the classes just in a little bit, but I just wanted you to introduce yourself because polar legend Nick Cox, very, very lucky, those watching, to have the opportunity to put your questions to Nick. Your current role is station manager.
Yeah.
So you're in charge of all of us miscreants up here. What does that sort of involve on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's an odd job, it must be said, rather unusual. It's much of it is management, like a lot of things, a lot of management, but it's management where there's not much room for mistake because we are so far flung once we get here. So a lot of it is just pre-planning, and I would think it's rather like putting on a play. You spend probably about 80%, 90% of the time preparing, and then when you're on stage, which we are now here in the Arctic, that's when hopefully it will all go to plan and everybody gets done what they want to do and they're safe and productive and happy.
I mean, amazing role, and I've been very fortunate to have been up here a number of times with you. Can I ask you to give us a sort of swift sort of roll through the various positions and jobs that you've done in the polar regions?
Wow. Yes, I started off. I'm an old stick. I started off 44 years ago. I mean, this is ancient history for those of you watching and listening. I started off, I was very keen to go to polar regions, and at that time it was quite difficult to go as a scientist. They only took surveyors and geologists, and they weren't quite sure whether that was possible. So actually I went off and trained as a carpenter, and then joined up when I was recruited at the age of 21. I actually joined up as a carpenter and a boatman and there wasn't medical cover then, so I was did the medical stuff for nearly 2.5 years, and then I became a general assistant, dog driver, driving Greenland or husky dogs, and then mountaineer guide, taking scientists out for 3 to 4 month sledge trip, boat skipper up here, doing quite extensive boat journeys up here, up in the Arctic, and then became base commander, and now the term has changed. It's known as a station manager. So, it's sort of been a bit of an apprenticeship in itself, just learning about these extraordinary places.
But and highlights from there. I mean, speaking to you, has been seems to have been working with the scientists and being out in the wilds.
What
the highlights of your
the
time?
highlights.
Yeah.
The remarkable people that I hope that some or better still many of you will have the chance to come to these places. They really are extraordinary, and the chances of you working and living in these places get more and more so, and it becomes more important. And beautiful the places are, and they're dramatic and beautiful and wild and isolated. It's the people that actually make it, and the splendid people who I've met along the way, extraordinary scientists, technicians, people like your good self who dedicated to what they do, and that's what makes it for me, just good people.
Nick, we've got a couple of questions come through from Panama, but should we just pop outside and just show them that we're not just in a shed. We are in a shed, but in a rather glorious place. And here we are, guys. It's.
Shall I stand here?
Yeah, do. And if I give you the, because I know you've been coming here for many years, so a guided tour of what we see, and it being windy, I don't probably have to be held quite close to your mouth.
Is that all right like that? Looking out here, we're looking out to the east and then out to the northeast. Beyond these mountains here, and glaciers and ice fields. Way beyond there, we go on to Franz Josef Land and into Arctic Russia. To the north, frozen seas that carry on to the pole, and then over to the Bering Strait, over to Russia and Alaska. But in the immediate distance, we're looking at ice fields, glaciers, and mountains here. And the definition's not very good today, but on the right-hand side here, you can see a quite bluish-looking glacier. It's very sort of chaotic. It's a lot of cracked ice with I don't know, like that. Is that better? With a lot of crevasses in it. The inland ice is fairly static, but it's slowly moving towards the edges, and it's accelerating as it comes down between the mountains, and the ice comes out and breaks off into the sea as icebergs. When it breaks off, icebergs float off out to sea. But what you're seeing there is really chaotic ice, and that bluey coloured ice, that glacier there called the Kronobren, is the fastest flowing glacier here in this region, in Svalbard. At this time of the year, it's probably flowing at something like 3 meters a day. And in the summertime, it goes up to 6 to 7 meters a day. It's extremely fast, full of holes, and
provide a little bit of wind.
Oh, is that okay? And not easy to travel on. The sea in the foreground here, that used to freeze over. The sea temperatures have increased over the years. There is sea ice in the inner fjord, but in recent years, the sea hasn't been freezing over, which makes it a little bit difficult for polar bears, which rely on that sea ice to be able to go out there and hunt for seal. But there is sea ice in other regions. Over on the east side, there's more sea ice, and that's where most of the polar bears will be. But I think that just about sums up what we see in the immediate.
Yeah, and if we just point out the station, just then we'll pop back inside, because I can see Ellie's fingers starting to, even though she's wearing gloves, I'm starting to go a little bit. And we'll trip over wires.
Tripping over wires at the same time. What to describe here?
Yes, I mean,
describe here. Yeah, this is a station, and they're extraordinary places. I mean, they're a hodgepodge of living accommodation, of laboratories, workshops, storage space is incredibly important. And all the sort of trappings of science and all the things that go with it to make it all possible. So, I mean, there you can see a few snow scooters there, containers, not the prettiest of sights, but all very functional. It's a bit like a farmyard or other sort of outdoor working places. You know, it's all practical and functional stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nick. Let's get inside before people's fingers start to go.
Fine.
So I grab that. Thank you very much. Ellie, even with your gloves on and that wind, I imagine getting chilly. Come back down. So I hope that even though there is a strong wind, really great to show you the outdoors. And I hope that even through that, with our baffles and muffles and everything else, that the students could hear clearly. I mean, the amazing sort of sights out there. These questions come through from Panama, and the first question is, what is it like to have devoted 40 years to one particular region of the planet?
Yeah, I mean, I feel very privileged, I must say, very privileged to see, experience and the place and get to know all these very fine people. And all I can say is I hope that some of you get to come to this place. And, you know, I would be delighted to help any of you on the way because it's these places need good people.
Perfect. And a follow-up question from that, sort of having worked in the polar regions for 40 years, what changes have you seen due to global warming?
Yeah, big changes over the years. I mean, the sort of really sort of blatantly obvious stuff. The temperatures are very much higher than it used to be. And the early days when I set out, I did sledge trips down to minus 48, minus 50, both up here and in the Antarctic. Coastal wise, in the same areas where I experienced those, you don't seem to get those temperatures so much now, and we're certainly much warmer here than we used to. I mean, I know it's mighty cold some days, particularly when the wind's blowing as it is at the moment. It's cold enough, that's for sure, but we're not getting the low temperatures. We're getting rain sometimes, which was pretty well unheard of. We used to get drizzle occasionally in the very midsummer, and now we're getting proper rain, and that's tough for the wildlife, for the reindeer, the foxes, the bears, and all the other creatures that rely on frozen. Because as long as you stay cold and frozen, it's actually you have the capacity to keep warm. Once you get wet, it's difficult.
Both the times I've been up in March
Yeah.
on the glacial projects, we've had rain.
Have you?
In Longyear once, and then
Really?
here,
So you've experienced
and
it.
sleet.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
+1 sleet.
Grim.
And really, really grim. And
Yeah.
then, but fluctuating, and then down sort of 15, 20 degrees by
Yeah.
the next
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Bonkers.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've mentioned we've looked out in the fjord. I mean, it's open sea, as it were.
Yeah.
When was the last time that you sort of saw that properly frozen over?
I think it was 2005, the last time it was a tabletop out there. So I think just earlier we showed you the sea out there, and that was just a white, flat tabletop. And the ice typically would be 3 feet or 1 meter thick by the time the end of the winter.
And
so we could travel on it quite safely, yeah. And of course, great for the seals because the seals, they use their teeth to come up through the ice, make a little hole, open it up, come up on the ice, and they would have their puppies up on the ice. So you'd look out on this flat white tabletop with all these little black dots all over the place with the seals with these gorgeous little pups. Beautiful.
Fantastic. What inspired you to go to the polar regions, and how old were you when that became your sort of mission in life?
Oh, wow. I think I almost day one, I think. I was certainly at the age of 6. My parents, dear parents, gave me a lovely book, the Puffin Picture Book of Polar Exploration, and that was it. That was all I wanted to do, and that's what kick-started me into this ambition.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And in your across your sort of polar career, could you pick out one job that's been your favourite?
Oh yeah, quite easily. Yeah, there's some great questions here. Thanks so much for these. Yeah, the highlight for me, always, I love animals, and I love working with animals, um, and driving a dog team out in an Arctic or Antarctic landscape is more than a thrill. It's just so exciting being at one with these extraordinary animals out in the middle of nowhere, depending on them, um, and being in a tent with them just sleeping just outside the door, and you know you're all going to work together the next day to try and get to the next step of the journey. It's very exciting.
I mean, working with dogs in the polar regions is or in Antarctica no longer
Yeah.
happen, but sort of it's something that's going to be a very very rare feat for those who are watching. What is it? What is it that makes it so special?
For me, it's, I mean, people who love dogs, and I'm sure a lot of you who with us today probably have a great love for dogs, and so there's that sort of lovely relationship that you have with the dog. But then to take it to a step further, where you're actually working together to achieve an aim, and there you have 9 dogs weighing anything up to 50 kilo, 100 pounds of dog, a big Greenland dog, and you've got, I don't know, something like 700 pounds of gear on your sled, and you're heading out into the wildness, and you need them and they need you, and there's nothing like it. It's not like setting off with a skidoo, where as long as the engine works, you're pretty sure you're going to get there. With a dog team, there's all sorts of things. It's a bit like, I think, always compare sailing a dinghy and then going with a motorboat. When you sail a dinghy, there's all sorts of things at play which might work, might not.
And I mean, you say that many of the students at home might have dogs. These are not cuddly.
No, no. The true polar dog actually isn't a husky. We tend to call them, certainly in the UK, we tend to call them huskies. And the husky is probably related to an Alaskan or Siberian timber wolf. They're a much lighter dog, and they've been interbred. They're very much more biddable. Wonderful dog, beautiful dogs, and used for trails and tourist trails and for racing, but they're great dogs, but they don't withstand the cold and can't pull the weights. The true polar dog is the Greenland dog, which is what the Inuit use in Greenland and Arctic Canada. And they're related to the Arctic wolf, and they're quite different. A true one, if it's a pure breed, they really don't need us. They work with you, but they don't need you. There's a sort of working relationship. If you let one loose, might just run away, and they'll fight to the kill. In the wolf fashion, there's that sort of the social structure where the king dog or the top dog will always beat down the next one, and you can't interfere with that. That's their business. So you sort of live with this pack of very large dogs who are sorting it out among themselves, whether they like each other or not. But then you harness all that energy, and when they're working, it's very exciting.
Amazing, fantastic to hear about it. Going to sort of a little bit more of a sort of like practical question is, obviously we've got power up here, and so think about living in the polar regions. How do we have electricity here?
Yeah, we use a generator, a diesel power generator, which I can imagine a lot of you thinking and saying, why aren't we using slightly more environmentally friendly ways of doing it? And we have tried and tried. Solar energy, fine in the summer, but actually much of the time then we're getting cloud cover, fun enough, during the warmer months.
Okay.
And although we've got 24-hour sunshine, and it's just not reliable enough. And then, of course, then for much the other half of the year, it's 24-hour darkness.
Yeah.
We've looked at wind power, but it's just not reliable enough. It's either blowing far too strong and trying to keep structures going. So for the moment, this is what we're doing. We one day there will be a way of doing it, which is a bit more environmentally friendly. But it works for the
It
moment.
works for the moment. And I mean, so we've got a quick question coming up. What have been the worst moments, or
Worst moments.
or potentially the sort of
Yeah.
scariest, if you.
Oh well, certainly scariest. Private fears, I suppose, that you have when you're in a tent and you know the next morning you're going to be the one leading off, and it's heavily crevassed, and you hope you don't go make a bish of it and drop you or somebody else worse into a crevasse. But the actual sort of worst moments, I think, have been, again, this is early days when things weren't so reliable. Boating is it's far more dangerous than working on the ice, because if something goes wrong on the ice when you're sledging, if it goes wrong, you just stop. You can put up a tent or solve the problem. If you're lost, you sit and wait till you've worked out where you are. Whereas out in the sea, and particularly polar sea, if things go wrong, things can go badly wrong. You can be swept out to sea. You can get swept under a grassy snout and find that there's ice dropping on top of you, or just out to sea and it's mighty cold out there and very rough sea. So broken down outboards and being swept away was always my most frightening moments. Yeah.
I mean, particularly sort of I mean, if you fell in, that would be.
Yeah, the sea freezes at about minus 1.6 degrees centigrade, so it can be below freezing and liquid. So you don't last for long in there. I think 5 minutes and you're probably not in best shape really.
And a very, very different environment, because the next question we've got coming up is the contrast. So what do you notice most when you go back to, I would say home, but you seem to have sort of spent time just going yo-yoing between the poles. But if you went back to the UK, what's the biggest things that you noticed?
Oh, these are very good questions. These are absolutely great. The biggest things. There's nothing like arriving in an airport. I mean, you've experienced this. That arriving in an airport and
what are all these people doing?
And all these people, and they're all so busy, and they've all got their lives and doing all these busy and wonderful things, and you've been cheek per jowl in a tiny little base with just a few people in a rather sort of rarefied environment. So that, and then of course having fruit available. I tend to eat bags and bags of tomatoes as soon as I get home, and milk, those luxuries. It's lovely seeing family and friends, and that's always gorgeous. And they can't really quite understand what it's like up here, and why should they? So you have to do a little bit of adapting, getting back into the way of things.
I find the green very different.
Yeah,
I mean, that's because here there's sort of like all the kit and the stuff. It all seems to be blues and reds and everything else, and there isn't that sort of
and smells, of course.
Yes.
We really have our heads in the freezer here. It's there's nothing much to smell, and the smells
are lucky.
We're probably yes, probably. But to smell flowers and grass, trees, and so on, that's always a great treat. I must say, I do love that.
Another sort of very practical question is where do we get our food from up here?
Yeah, everything has to be shipped in. So planning ahead. So every scrap of food has to be thought about, ordered, packed, listed, all these things loaded onto a ship, and then it comes up here and then sorted out here, stored away with food way in advance, just in case we can't get a ship in for some time. So there's always food kept in store, just in case there was ever a hold up.
And I mean, you hear from sort of earlier expeditions, maybe in the 19th and early 20th century, sort of hunting for food in the polar regions. I mean, does that ever happen still?
They do take some seal for the dogs, and some people don't like that. But these for sledge dogs that we have here, some people don't like that. But then I always say, well, that's all that dogs eat. That is their main diet. And if you take a can of dog food off the supermarket shelf, it's actually the same thing. It's an animal somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a shape. So we do, and occasionally we might have a fillet off one of those, just to pack out, have a little bit of fresh food, but not very often.
Not very often.
Not very often.
And I mean, how do we've got students watching from a variety of countries, but if you think about the sort of the States and the UK, I'm not sure about sort of Brazil and Colombia and their polar programs, but what should a student watching today start to do if they wanted to visit or have a career in the polar regions?
Yeah, I mean, visiting these days isn't too difficult. I mean, there are tourist companies and so on that will take you, but they wouldn't take you to somewhere like this. We keep this area pristine, and it's a sort of for sort of work purposes only, environmental research only. But that doesn't mean you can't go to polar regions. But to truly experience it, I think you do really need to come and have a career in it, like you have, and it's and the way to do that is it's not all the sciences. There's all sorts of way of going about it. I didn't study as a scientist. I came up through the technical side. Is to sort of all the additional skills. That's what I always think about. You can do all study, pass exams, go and train in whatever field. There are so many fields that you can go into which make you eligible. But the other thing is to look at all the other things. Enjoy the outdoors. Doesn't mean you have to be a big climber or a big mountain climber and that sort of thing, but just spend time outdoors. Yeah. And the other thing that sort of probably the most important thing for anybody who's taking up a polar career is your ability to get on. Because if you can't get on with your fellow people,
yep,
you certainly wouldn't fit in a polar region. So, or I always say to this, look after each other, because that's good training.
Yes.
And that's what's really needed up here more than anything, just looking after each other.
Very much so. And I mean, so there's a variety of different routes. I mean, I think the looking after you point and is great, but I think what you said is really important, because you see the people who get into the media as sort of polar people are either sort of adventure athletes or they're scientists. But as you point out, there are a whole range of other careers. So even if you don't want to sort of go and do a doctorate or you don't want to sort of run across big expanses of whiteness, there are plenty of other ways
of course.
to do it.
I mean, in this day and age, the explorers are the scientists. They're the ones who are exploring. We know such a lot about polar regions. We've got satellite images. We've got the map sorted out. So the exploration is actually the fine detail, and it's becoming increasingly important. So great to go. The adventure trips, athletic stuff are great, but the real exploration are these splendid scientists that we have here and in the Antarctic.
Brilliant. And question coming through insofar as we've talked about both poles. We've talked about all the different things you can do there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favourite between the poles?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I do.
Be careful, we are in the Arctic.
We are in the Arctic. To be in a field situation out in the middle of nowhere, I mean, the Antarctic is extraordinary. So much fit human foot hasn't set foot on. Is that the right way to put it?
Yes.
And it's so immense, twice the size of Australia. I mean, it's just colossal. It's got so many record-breaking statistics to go with it, and when you're out in the middle on a sledge journey there, it's just extraordinary. The field is wonderful here. To be on a station and with research, I actually love it here, and I love the international element, the fact that we work so closely with Italians, French, Chinese, Indians, Japanese, the rest, and that I find very stimulating. And I think you probably find the same. There's something about fellow human beings from other nations. It's very stimulating.
Well, I mean, I think the interesting thing about the Arctic and the Antarctic is the way that sort of borders dissolve up here. And in the Antarctic, hopefully, although people have put borders there are no real borders.
Sure.
And we were talking about this before, and to understand our planet requires um, speaking across cultures, speaking across scientific disciplines, and that even within academia, to break down those sort of boundaries in between the sciences. And here is this, for me, it exemplifies that need to have different avenues of research, whether it's a geographical, geological, life sciences, oceanography.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then having all the different perspectives from the different countries.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Really exciting.
I mean, I know we're talking to, how many countries are we talking to now?
I think
And that
six,
in
yeah.
itself is exciting. But imagine if we were all here together in the Orlisund, and it's just a lovely feeling, all nationalities
next
together.
year.
Next year.
Yes.
Good idea.
Yeah,
Good
we'll
idea.
do Arctic Live. Everybody come here. Because the next question is how do we communicate with the outside world? How is it that we're so remote, and yet we can talk to the schools in all these different countries?
Well, maybe you should explain that one. I know the sort of basic communication that we have.
And we're very lucky here because we've got this fibre optic cable.
Yeah.
When and how did that happen?
That came in, I'm guessing a little bit, I think it was about 4 years ago. And we suddenly have this, extraordinary link. Prior to that, it was VHF links to a little repeater station up in the middle of the ice cap behind me here, and all fairly sort of unreliable.
Yes.
And now we have all this sort of swift communication. But the reason this fibre cable was put in is because we've got a satellite disk local to here, which is listening to quasars, which I am told are the furthest removed body from Earth. And they listen to radio signals from there and help map very accurately the position of land masses on Earth. But what I love about this bit of research is that the radio signals that they listen to from quasars set off before the Earth existed.
That's amazing.
And that is quite mind-blowing.
And then they're sending all this data back.
That's why we have
then
that's
because the Earth's surface is constantly moving and everything else. So even if you had a GPS in your car, it relies on
this data
to know where those 2 points are and how much they've moved apart.
Absolutely crucial.
You go to sleep one night and wake up the next morning and there's 2 places that are a different distance apart. Amazing.
It's so exciting.
And we piggyback off that to share the Arctic.
To talk to you good people.
Yes. So we have, how long do you stay or work in the Arctic for any one time? And that's from Evie and Albert.
Oh, Evie and Albert, these are
aged
good.
8 and 5.
Oh, nice. Good questions. Really good question. My first trip, I went off to the Antarctic, and I was away for it was getting on for 3 years by the time I got home. That was the longest trip, and then I did another one of 20 months, and I've done a lot at 6 months and 5 months. Now I don't do much more than 3 months of each year away, so it's nothing like what I used to do. Yeah.
And for me, the projects we do are here quite short. It's coming up and getting a record amount of data in a sort of 2 to 3 week period. Is that quite typical for the field teams?
It is now. I mean, again, that's a marked change over the years. It used to be really quite difficult to get here, and once you got here, you stayed here for a long time because it was difficult to get out again. And whereas now, we do have a little aeroplane that can come in, helicopter. When the ice is free, ships can come in. So it's very much easier for people to come in and out.
And another question from Evie and Albert, and they are asking about the glaciers in Svalbard and a risk of falling through the ice. What are the risks of falling in?
Yeah, these are good questions. I think when you're out traveling on the ice, that is the number one fear of falling down a hole in the ice or a crevasse where these big cracks appear, and they can be hundreds of feet deep. But we're very cautious. Even if you're cautious, you get caught out every now and again, and and do fall into these things. But we're careful. We study the glaciers. You can read a glacier, the places that is most likely to have crevasses in it, and then you go along at a quite slow speed so that you can study the land and look for possibility of a crack. Because what happens is these cracks or crevasses get covered and they get what we call a bridge. So the snow, which might be, something like 2 feet thick, that's covering the crack. And of course, when you stand on that 2 feet thick bit of snow, it just gives way and you fall through. But so we're just very careful. And if you're in doubt, you go ahead with a crevasse probe, which is a long rod, and just probe and find the way. And sometimes we go on ski just very carefully and put flags so you find your way around. I used to. It was quite exciting going through crevasse fields with sledge dogs, and very occasionally you got it wrong, and a poor old dog would fall down a crevasse, and sometimes more than one dog would fall down, and the poor dogs would swing around down there in the harnesses, and it wasn't very nice for them at all. But you'd go along the trace and open up the hole and look down and talk to them and calm them down and so on. But sometimes you get two dogs that didn't like each other, and they'd be spinning down the hole like this and growling at each other, and they'd forget their fear and just and start growling at each other. So you'd having to tell them off down there to stop arguing, and then pull them up and then go on your way again. Wonderful dogs.
And I mean, is it just something that was just run of the mill after a while?
What
Falling in the hole?
No, I think once you've done it a few times, you don't want to do it again. It's pretty frightening, I must say, when you drop in, even if you've got a rope on, and some people I've known who've got injured through drops, even though they've had ropes on them and everything. So it is probably the thing that you do fear most out there. But we're so careful. We're very, very careful. Yeah. Polar people are. We always say we're unlike mountaineers who are rather fast and athletic and so on. We're sort of trudgers. It's sort of going forward, check, check, check. We're so far away from anybody who can help us that everything you do, you're sort of calculating and being extremely careful.
And I mean, the polar regions. I mean, they have all these challenges in them, but they also have these wonders. And at the moment, we don't have a sunset at the moment. We're on 24-hour daylight. What does that feel like, and how is that different to having day and night?
It's quite stimulating, isn't it? I mean, I think it's a lovely thing. You kind of exhilarated by it and lifted by it. I'd say if there is a downside to it, is that you're probably not sleeping as well or long as you might. And after some weeks and certainly months of being up here, you see people getting really quite tired. They look tired. Yeah. They've been, sort of sleep has been minimal. And the sleep they've had has maybe not been such good quality. But on the plus side, it's very pretty, and it's lovely to see the midnight sun.
I mean, I think I call it lat-lag. When you
that's a good.
Lag, when
that's
you're
a good.
Like
that's a good
moving from a normal day and night
to good description.
To up here. My favourite time is that time looking out this way in sort of late April, when you get that sort of low sun, and you get the sort of sun columns and the sun dogs and all
sun
these
dogs,
solar phenomenon. Where are we? Coming back here. Population of Neolson. What are we looking at here?
It's surprisingly big. Probably won't seem big to you, but for a polar station, it's quite big.
Yeah.
25 people stay here for the winter, and most of those are technicians. They're everything from diesel mechanic, tractor mechanic, chef, carpenter, plumber, and so on. People who doing those crucial jobs to keep everything going in a very sort of stark, cold and windy environment. And there are some technicians who keep the science gear going as well through the winter. But the most of the science is during the period when there is light in the sky, i.e. when the sun comes up from March onwards. And then the numbers go up, anything up to sort of 150. We've even gone up near 200, but only for short spells. And much of the time we seem to be sort of 60 or 70 people. Yeah.
And I mean, it does feel like a community here, and it does feel like, I mean, I certainly see the same familiar faces year after year, which is lovely. There's some very quickly, we've got 5 minutes left, very sadly. Albert and Evie, is the ice cracking noisy?
Oh yes, it can be. Well, Albert and Evie, you've got some very good questions there. They're absolutely great. Yes, it can be very noisy, and can make you jump quite a bit when there's a sort of crack, when you wonder what is that underneath me or is it elsewhere. But yes, it can be very noisy. Ice is moving and it gets under tension, and every now and again you get something releases, and it makes you jump. That's
Makes you
sure.
jump. What other sounds do you get up there? What does the Arctic sound like?
Favourite sounds.
Yeah.
And we had this the other day. It was very, very pretty. And it's one of my favourite, is when you've got very strong wind, and it picks up the snow, and it's what we call spindrift, and it's particularly when it's very cold, the snow goes like sand, and it's rather like if you're on a beach and you pick up dry sand, and you pick it up and it just runs through your fingers, and it's very gritty and hard, and the wind just blows the snow, and so you've got the white snow surface and ice, and then you've got about, I don't know, 2 foot or 3 foot of just thick wind-driven snow, and it is so beautiful. It looks like thousands upon thousands of silk scarves wishing in the wind and following each little contour, and it is so beautiful. And then every now and again you get a major gust, and it'll send some up whipping into the air, and the noise, it's rather like, if any of you have ever been on a farm, it's a bit like grain coming down through a silo. It's a sort of rushing and rather attractive. That's my favourite.
I squeaky snow.
The squeaky snow, that iron hard snow. Yeah, and it does squeak.
Yes,
it does squeak. Sounds like a mouse.
Yes, it's sort of when you're sort of you just, and that's a temperature related phenomenon.
Yeah, I think it's just got to a sufficiently cold temperature where everything is not going to give, and when you stand on it, it squeaks.
So squeaky snow.
Squeaky snow is one of the nicest. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
And you just hear people coming from a mile away. Sort of,
yeah, this is lovely.
Couple more questions we have. What job would you do if you were not doing this?
I would like to be with people like you, I think. I'd love to work in schools, and to all those, being with great people like you and the great teaching staff you have. I think you're in a very great place, and the springboard that you've got there is, there's nothing more important.
So, headmaster of a...
Oh no, I don't think I'd make headmaster.
I think you would be brilliant headmaster.
No, I don't think so. I think I'd be cleaning the corridors.
Keeping everybody in check. Have you ever suffered from frostbite?
Yes. Yes, quite a lot. Never badly enough that I've gone black and lost bits. But if again, good question. If you were to come out in a really cold day with me, you would probably be fine, and you would think, or you'd think it rather strange that I would be the first one to go and get frost nip or frostbite, because it does seem that once you've got it, you're more prone to getting it, you're more likely to get it. So yes, I've had fingers, toes, cheek. The worst was eyelids, actually, and these kind. But I've led
your nose.
Nose, yeah, of course, that's one of the first.
I remember my first day. I had a nice frost nip. Yeah.
But I led one expedition on the east coast of Svalbard, and we had it down to about -50. And one fellow lost the end of his thumb, and Ian Glasser lost a toe, and another fellow lost a bit of his face, and we all got, pretty numbed, I must say.
And does that just and you feel it after a while? Is the end of your fingers just aren't quite what
Yeah, yeah, that's the extraordinary thing. It's rather irritating actually because you have a lot of people together who've all lost the feeling at the end of the fingers, and everybody sits around the table going like this because they can't. It's sort of classic. Everybody's doing this, but it returns, and actually, in many ways, it's rather like sunburn. You know, you shouldn't get it. You can be avoided. So you've made a mistake if you get it.
Yeah.
And actually, it's the same. It's the other extreme. You know, you haven't burnt the skin, but you've frozen it, and it's
So almost a cold burn.
a cold burn. Yeah. And actually, one of the problems is that when you got it, you don't feel anything. So you're yeah, it's
Yeah. Until later.
till later.
Don't warm me up.
Yeah, exactly.
I do find that the heated skidoo handles sometimes you lose your fingers, and then the heat in the skidoo handles warms them up, and then you get the burning.
Painful.
Yep.
One of the best things to do if you've got absolute